Overthinking isn't just a bad habit. It's a slow poison that drains your energy, hijacks your peace, and convinces you that thinking more is the way out, when in reality, it's what's trapping you. If you've ever found yourself stuck in a loop, replaying the same conversation, obsessing over what could go wrong, or questioning every small decision, then you already know how overthinking quietly destroys the life you're trying to enjoy. It turns simple moments into mental battles, and ordinary days into storms of doubt. But what if the answer isn't to think harder, but to think less and better? In this video, we're not just talking theory. You'll discover 7 grounded insights that show how overthinking creeps in, and more importantly, how to stop it before it controls your life. These aren't quick fixes. Their daily practices are rooted in ancient Stoic wisdom and real human experience, practical enough to use starting today. If you're ready to take back your clarity, your focus, your presence, then stay with me. Listen more than once if you need to. Practice one idea each day, and don't keep this to yourself. Share it with someone you care about. Comment clarity if you're here to let go of the noise. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe. Because peace, like wisdom, grows with repetition. 1. You think too much because you pay attention to the wrong thoughts. Overthinking doesn't begin with too many thoughts. It begins with misplaced attention. What ruins your peace isn't the fact that your mind produces noise. Every mind does. But that you tune in to every whisper like it's breaking news. Imagine standing in front of your fridge, door open, lights on, and forgetting why you even walked there. That's what your mind does when you let every thought come and go unchecked. Most people believe overthinking is a sign of high intelligence or deep introspection. But more often, it's just your brain spinning its wheels, stuck in loops because it hasn't been trained to filter. Your attention, in that sense, is not a passive observer. It's a spotlight. And whatever you shine it on grows. Doubts get louder, worries expand, regrets echo longer. Not because they're more important, but because you keep looking at them. It's no different than giving a stage to someone who talks nonsense. The more audience they get, the more power they have. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology confirmed it. You may not control every thought that arises, but you do control which ones you entertain. And that's the root of personal freedom. Let's be honest. In today's hyper-connected world, mental clarity habits are rare. We don't just consume information anymore, we're bombarded by it. Notifications, updates, comparisons, judgments, they all compete for our focus. And without discipline, our focus becomes a free-for-all. This is how mental clutter begins. One what if becomes a rabbit hole. One vague memory becomes an emotional spiral. And instead of living in the present, we're stuck answering mental pop-ups that were never worth clicking on. That's why overthinking feels exhausting. It's not because the thoughts themselves are heavy, but because you've given your energy to the wrong ones. You didn't just listen. You gave them a seat at your table, served them coffee, and asked for their opinion. To break that cycle, you need to reclaim your focus. You need to recognize that attention is the gatekeeper of peace. Emotional self-control starts when you stop treating every thought as a fact. It continues when you stop treating every worry as worthy of your time. And it strengthens when you train your mind to return to the present again and again. Mindfulness for men, especially in a world that demands stoicism without understanding it, isn't about becoming passive or numb. It's about becoming precise. Stoic mindset is less about suppressing emotion and more about sharpening attention, choosing where your energy goes and where it doesn't. Think about it. Most of the stress you carry isn't from what happened, but from what you kept replaying. Most anxiety isn't from what's real, but from what you imagined. And most distractions didn't knock your door down, you let them in. If you want clarity, if you truly want to stop overthinking and relax, you don't need more motivation. You need better attention hygiene. You need to stop shining a light on thoughts that bring darkness. The mind doesn't become peaceful by force. It becomes peaceful through training. And that begins when you make one firm decision. Not every thought deserves your presence, because your attention is limited, and peace only grows where it's planted. 2. Not all thoughts are truth. Most are just noise. There's a voice inside your head, and it speaks more than anyone you know. It comments on your every move, revisits the past, rehearses the future, and pretends to predict what others think of you. And most days you believe it. But here's what most people never stop to ask. What if that voice isn't wise? What if it's just loud? Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling your phone. You pause on an image, and suddenly a thought pops up. You always fall short. But no one said that. No one typed it. It came from nowhere. And still, it lands like truth. That's the trap. Overthinking feeds on the assumption that if you thought it, it must be real. But the Stoics taught us something radical. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who sees them come and go. That distinction is everything. Because when you confuse mental noise for wisdom, your inner peace gets hijacked by static. Think of your mind like a radio. There are stations that inform you, inspire you, and ground you. But there are also channels that just play interference. You wouldn't sit in your car for hours listening to a broken signal, so why let those broken self-critical thoughts play in your head on repeat? Mental clarity habits begin with awareness, not judgment, just noticing. When your mind says you're failing or everyone is ahead of you, that's not a prophecy. That's mental pollution. And just like polluted air, you don't always see it right away, but you feel the weight of it over time. This is why so many people walk through life exhausted, not from what they do, but from what they think. It's not the tasks that wear them down. It's the constant internal commentary running in the background, never shutting off. Overthinking thrives when we assign meaning to every mental flicker. A moment of doubt becomes a spiral. A simple memory becomes regret. A brief fear becomes identity. But thoughts are not facts. They're impressions, conditioned by your past, your environment, your mood. One day you think you're capable. Next you feel like a failure. Has your life really changed that much? Or just the filter you're using? Stoicism reminds us that what matters isn't what appears, it's what we choose to engage with. As Epictetus said, it's not things that trouble us, but our judgment of them. The same applies to your internal world. If a thought makes you feel small, weak, or anxious, question it. Don't obey it, because most thoughts don't arrive to help you. They just pass through, looking for attention. And the more you give them, the more powerful they seem. The path to emotional self-control and inner peace isn't paved with more thinking. It's shaped by discernment. That's what mindfulness for men truly means in the modern age. Not becoming soft, not ignoring pain, but developing the strength to pause, to look at a thought and say, "Not today, you don't belong here." It takes practice, it takes patience. But with time, your mind begins to shift. You stop reacting to every wave. You stop chasing every echo. You realize you don't need to be right all the time. You just need to be clear. And clarity comes when you stop mistaking the noise for the message. You won't silence your mind completely. That's not the goal. The goal is to stop giving authority to a voice that never earned your trust. The goal is to build a filter so sharp that only what serves you gets through. Because in the end, peace isn't the absence of thoughts, it's the presence of truth. And truth, unlike noise, doesn't shout. It waits quietly to be heard. 3. You suffer more from your interpretations than the reality. Let's pause here for a moment. If you're still with me, it means something important. You're not just skimming through another self-help video. You're walking through this with intention. And that says something powerful about you. You're not chasing shortcuts, you're choosing clarity. And if you stay with me through the next few minutes, you may start to see your own pain through a different lens. Because one of the hardest truths in life is this. Most of the pain you carry didn't come from what happened. It came from the story you told yourself about it. You sent a text, they didn't reply. Your mind instantly fires up. Did I do something wrong? Are they upset with me? Did I mess up again? That's not awareness. That's an interpretation. And interpretation is where overthinking thrives. The reality? Maybe their phone died. Maybe they were in a meeting. But your mind doesn't wait for truth. It fills in the blanks with worst-case scenarios and lets the emotional spiral begin. This is the space where overthinking becomes suffering, not because something happened, but because your mind made meaning out of silence. The Stoics understood this long ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That strength doesn't come from controlling the world. It comes from owning the narrative. Because while life brings pain, it's your interpretation that gives it weight. A comment becomes a wound, a glance becomes judgment, a delay becomes rejection. And each time you accept that interpretation without questioning it, you give more of yourself away. Overthinking is often just this, the brain trying to protect you by preparing for threats that don't even exist. But what if you created space? Space between the trigger and your reaction, between the situation and the story. That's where freedom begins. That space is where emotional self-control is born. It's where mindfulness lives. And it's where the clarity to stop overthinking quietly takes root. Because the real problem isn't what happened, it's how long you've let it echo in your mind. You reply to comments for days, but forget what was actually said. You revisit an awkward moment like it defines you, instead of letting it pass like weather. And you do this not because you're weak, but because no one taught you to pause, to examine the thought before you believe it, to question whether the story you're telling yourself is the only version that exists. Let me say this again. You're not suffering because it hurt. You're suffering because you keep reliving it. And in reliving it, you give it power that it didn't originally have. Overthinking doesn't stop when the world becomes easier. It stops when you choose not to add layers to what is. That's the quiet discipline of a Stoic mindset, to see clearly, feel deeply, and yet not be ruled by either. It's not about being numb, it's about being grounded. Because when you no longer mistake your interpretation for the event itself, you stop carrying emotional weight that was never yours to begin with. What happened may have lasted a moment. But how long does it live inside you? That's a decision. Not always an easy one, but a possible one. And if you're here, still listening, it means you're ready to start making that choice. The choice to respond instead of react. To observe your mind instead of obeying it. To let go of the mental loops that steal your peace and give yourself permission to live in the truth, not in the stories you've been replaying. Keep going, because clarity isn't found by thinking more. It's found by thinking less and seeing more. 4. The mind becomes sick when it consumes without filtering. You wouldn't install every app on your phone, right? You wouldn't open unknown links, let pop-ups take over your screen, or hand your password to strangers. But your mind? That's where we lose our discipline. We let everything in. News designed to provoke fear. Posts built to trigger comparison. Opinions that shrink our sense of worth. The damage doesn't always come from the content itself. It comes from the fact that it enters unfiltered. Just as the body can't thrive on junk food, the mind breaks down under the weight of mental junk. We're not wired to process this many voices, this much noise, this constant stream of input. So when you feel overwhelmed, anxious, or distracted, maybe it's not that life is too hard. Maybe it's that your mental inbox is overflowing with things that were never meant for you. Overthinking often isn't a sign of deep thought. It's a symptom of mental indigestion. You've consumed too much without ever pausing to digest, question, or reject. Every moment you scroll, your mind is absorbing. Images become comparisons. Headlines become anxiety. A friend's success becomes a measure of your failure. The problem isn't social media or the internet itself. It's a lack of boundaries. No filter, no gatekeeper. And over time, the mind becomes like a cluttered room where you can't find what you need because you've let everything pile up. Stoicism teaches something simple, yet profound. You don't need to know everything. You just need to know what not to entertain. That wisdom isn't passive. It's powerful. Because in a world of endless information, the ability to ignore becomes a strength. Musonius Rufus once said that true wisdom doesn't lie in endless knowledge, but in curated understanding. What you let into your mind shapes what your mind becomes. What you consume eventually consumes you. There's a reason why so many people feel anxious the moment they wake up. Before their feet hit the ground, they're already comparing, reacting, scrolling, and absorbing. The day hasn't even started. Yet their peace is already gone, not because anything bad happened, but because they didn't protect the entry point. Clarity, like peace, is not an accident. It's built through consistent habits. When you practice filtering your mental diet, what you read, who you listen to, what you focus on, you start to notice something strange and beautiful. The mind quiets down. It doesn't feel so urgent. The inner critic loses power. And overthinking doesn't have as many entry points to latch onto. This is where emotional self-control takes root, not in willpower alone, but in the environment. You can't expect to live with inner peace if you spend all day bathing in digital chaos. You don't need to become a monk. But you do need to choose. Ask yourself daily, what am I feeding my mind right now? Is this helping me build the life I want, or is it just noise that drains me by the end of the day? The truth is, you don't need to quit the world. You just need to guard the gates. A clear mind isn't given, it's cultivated. A peaceful inner life isn't a reward for perfection. It's a byproduct of selection. And the more you curate, the more you reclaim your life from the flood. Because at the end of the day, stillness isn't found by adding more. It's found by letting less in. The quality of your attention depends on the quality of what you allow yourself to see. And that's where real clarity begins. 5. The race to know everything destroys the wisdom of silence. We live in an age where not knowing something for 5 seconds feels like a personal failure. You hear a quote, search who said it. You forget an actor's name, Google it. There's a strange pressure now to have an answer to everything, to be informed at all times, to never say I'm not sure. And yet, despite this flood of information, most people feel more confused, more anxious, more restless. That's not because they lack knowledge, it's because they lack stillness. The modern mind is flooded not by ignorance, but by excess. And what many don't realize is that overthinking often disguises itself as the pursuit of learning. A friend once told me, I don't know how to relax unless I'm learning something. He thought he was growing, but really he was grinding, filling his mind with constant input, chasing productivity in disguise. He confused stimulation for progress and noise for clarity. But growth isn't measured by how much you consume. It's reflected in how deeply you absorb. The Stoics understood this difference long before algorithms began demanding your attention. They taught that wisdom isn't found in always knowing the answer, but in learning how to sit with the unknown. As Epictetus advised, don't just accumulate ideas, digest them. Let silence finish the sentence. In a world that values noise, silence becomes a radical act. Because silence is not empty. It's full of answers that only appear when the mind is calm enough to hear them. This is where the wisdom of simplicity and presence begins, not in knowing everything, but in having the clarity to know what matters. But the more you chase every idea, the harder it becomes to hear your own inner voice. That's why so many people today feel disconnected from themselves. It's not that they lack intellect, it's that they're drowning in data without space to breathe. You see it everywhere. People are reading dozens of books, jumping between podcasts, following every voice of influence, and yet still feeling lost. Not because they're not smart, but because they haven't learned to pause. They haven't learned that mental clarity doesn't come from adding more thoughts. It comes from creating space between them. A quiet mind isn't an ignorant one. It's a disciplined one. A mind that knows when to step back, observe, and listen. That's what mindfulness for men really looks like today. Not sitting in lotus position for hours, but having the courage to disconnect, to not have the last word, to let something go unanswered. Because not every question needs an answer right away. Some truths unfold in their own time. And sometimes the wisest thing you can say is, I don't know, and that's okay. The chase for more knowledge can become a form of subtle anxiety. It keeps you mentally busy, but emotionally numb. And when your mind is always running, your presence disappears. You're here, but you're not really here. You're thinking about what's next, what you missed, what you should be doing better. You don't need more thoughts, you need more space. That's where emotional self-control begins, not in knowing what to say, but in knowing when to say nothing. When to let stillness speak for you. When to allow the wisdom of silence to settle in, like morning light through a quiet room. Because in that stillness, your mind isn't empty, it's precise, it's calm, it's yours again. And in a world that teaches you to keep chasing, learning how to stop is the rarest and most powerful discipline of all. 6. Trying to control what's not yours to control feeds anxiety. Let me tell you something I wish someone had said to me sooner. Not everything you carry belongs to you. We live in a world that praises responsibility, hustle, and fixing everything we touch. And that's noble, until it quietly becomes self-destruction. I had a neighbor once, a good man, who spent years trying to help his grown son get his life back together. He helped with job searches, offered to cover rent, and even set up daily calls to keep his son accountable. He did everything right except protect his own peace. Nothing changed in the situation. His son stayed stuck. But the father? He lost sleep, lost focus, lost his sense of calm. That's what happens when you try to control things that were never meant to be yours. And it's far more common than we think. You care deeply, you want to help, you want to prevent the worst. So you overthink every possible outcome, every move they might make, every reaction they might have. You try to predict and prevent. But what you're really doing is blurring the line between concern and control. Stoic wisdom draws that line clearly. Focus only on what is within your control. Everything else is indifferent. At first glance, it can sound detached or cold, but it's actually one of the warmest truths you'll ever learn, because it gives you permission to stop carrying what isn't yours. You cannot control someone else's emotions. You cannot control how they perceive you. You cannot control whether they choose growth or stay stuck. What you can control is how you show up. How do you speak? How do you set boundaries? And most importantly, how you interpret the unfolding of events. When you confuse responsibility with control, you trap yourself in a loop of anxiety. You work endlessly, but feel powerless. You care deeply, but feel depleted. You try harder and harder still, until you realize your efforts aren't creating change. They're just costing you your inner peace. Overthinking is often misplaced energy. You're not lazy. You're just overinvested in the wrong direction. You're working hard, but not where it matters, and that's where the exhaustion comes from. The mind becomes restless, not because it's full of purpose, but because it's stuck in places it doesn't belong. The same principle that applies to the body applies to the mind. Overextension without proper focus leads to fatigue and burnout. This is why mental clarity habits are essential, not just for efficiency, but for survival. You don't get stronger by holding everything tighter. You get stronger by knowing when to release. So ask yourself, what am I holding that I was never meant to carry? Who am I trying to fix, manage, or protect in ways that only they can choose for themselves? This is not detachment, this is discernment. Mindfulness for men in today's world isn't about checking out. It's about checking in and asking what is actually mine to handle, and then having the emotional self-control to act only within that space. Peace doesn't come from controlling outcomes. It comes from controlling how you show up in the middle of what you cannot change. It comes from accepting that your role in someone's life is to support, not to script. That your job is to respond, not to rearrange the universe. Overthinking ends where responsibility is honored and control is surrendered. Because when you finally stop managing the uncontrollable, you reclaim the energy to manage what's always been yours. Your thoughts, your habits, your responses, your mindset. And in that quiet return to what's real, anxiety starts to loosen its grip. The mind, once flooded by fear of what could happen, becomes grounded in what is. And that's where your strength lives. Not in fixing everything, but in facing it with grounded presence and clear intention. 7. You don't need more thoughts, you need more presence. You've probably had that moment in the shower. Your hands moving, the water running, your body going through the motions. Yet your mind is somewhere else entirely. Maybe it's tomorrow's deadline or a mistake you made last week. You're there, but not really. And that's the hidden cost of overthinking. We become ghosts in our own lives, physically present but mentally absent. It's not because you lack intelligence. It's not because you don't care. It's because you've trained your mind to live anywhere but here. Somewhere along the way, we began believing that thinking more means living better. That if we just analyze the past deeply enough or predict the future precisely enough, we'll finally gain peace. But that's a lie the anxious mind loves to tell. Because the truth is simpler, quieter, and far more radical. You don't need more thoughts. You need more presence. No one says it loud enough, but you are allowed to stop thinking. You are allowed to just be. And that's not laziness. That's what being alive actually means. Stoic philosophy pointed this out long before the modern world became addicted to mental noise. You've been given this moment. Why trade it for one that doesn't even exist yet? That's the paradox of overthinking. We fill our heads with the past and future while starving ourselves of the present. And then we wonder why we're tired, disconnected, and numb. But what if peace doesn't require a breakthrough or a strategy? What if it simply asks that you return to the moment unfolding right now? When your mind starts spinning, don't try to fight it. Don't argue with your thoughts or spiral deeper by asking why you're thinking so much again. That only fuels the storm. Instead, return to what's real. Feel your feet on the ground. Notice the breath in your chest. Hear the subtle sounds around you, the hum of the room, the breeze outside the window. These things don't ask for interpretation, they just ask to be noticed. And in noticing them, you begin to shift, not by force, but by awareness. Presence doesn't shout, it waits. It welcomes you back whenever you're ready. The mind that constantly seeks more thoughts to solve itself is like a person trying to escape a swamp by running deeper into it. The harder you think, the more tangled things become. But when you stop, breathe, and root yourself in the now, the weight begins to lift. That's because your nervous system recognizes something the mind forgets. The present is safe. The present is clear. The present is enough. Overthinking thrives in abstraction, in questions with no answers, in loops with no exits. But presence is grounding. It's the one place your life is actually happening. This is where emotional self-control is born. Not in fixing your thoughts, but in returning to the body, to the senses, to the now. When we do that, the need for clarity softens. You begin to feel again. And through feeling, not analyzing, you start to remember what peace actually feels like. Mindfulness for men isn't just meditation or breath work. It's showing up to your own life fully awake. It's having a conversation without rehearsing your next sentence. It's walking without reaching for your phone. It's sitting in silence without feeling the itch to fill it. And yes, it takes practice, but the more often you return to presence, the less seductive overthinking becomes. You begin to see that most of your stress wasn't rooted in reality, it was rooted in absence. You weren't here, but now you can be. Right now is all you ever truly have. And when you learn to inhabit it, life becomes less about managing mental clutter and more about experiencing what's real. You don't need to chase stillness, you only need to stop running from it. Because the peace you've been overthinking your way toward, it's been here the whole time, waiting for you to notice. Overthinking doesn't make life clearer, it clouds it. You don't need more thoughts. You need more presence, clarity, and emotional self-control. What truly helps is building simple, daily discipline. Filter what you consume, question what you believe, and stay grounded in the now. A calm mind isn't given, it's earned through focus, stillness, and mindful action. The Stoic mindset isn't about avoiding emotion, it's about choosing what shapes your inner world. So start small. Let silence do its work. Let your attention return to what matters. When you stop chasing every thought, you begin to reclaim your mental clarity, inner peace, and personal freedom. If this message spoke to something inside you, share your story in the comments below. What kind of thoughts have kept you stuck, and what helps you return to the present? Let's build a space for clarity and resilience together. And if this video brought you value, don't forget to like and subscribe for more grounded insights.